Hey guys, John here. Right now we are back kind of behind our barn structure thing here, and we are in what I like to call the boneyard. The boneyard doesn't have very much stuff in it, but what it does have is the remains of my John Deere 240. I love this thing. This thing was my baby. Originally it had the Kawasaki FC 420V. I think it's a 14 horsepower engine. That ended up blowing up. They really don't like working in cold weather. It was about -10. I was trying to pull some snow out of the way with a sleeve hitch, and every time it just was starting harder and harder. Then finally something let loose, and that was it. So I put in this, I think it was supposedly a 16.5 horsepower Briggs. It came out of a Sabre, the one that hood came from. I think it's, if you look past the Sabre branded part numbers and just look at the motor, I think the motor comes back as a 16 horse. And it was always a little bit weird. It had documented paperwork showing that it had been rebuilt by a machine shop, but it was always a little bit tight. Tried to kind of do some break-in, and eventually something inside gave up the ghost. I don't know if it was the crank, if the connecting rod bearing on the crank was just too tight that it made the whole thing tight, but it ended up giving up as well. At that point, this was the second engine in 2 years. Never had such bad luck with these things, and that killed motivation. Even though I loved this thing, it was time for it to give its good parts to other things, and motivation just dropped. I was done with it. And it does still kind of hurt to see it in this condition, but it has given its parts to a lot of good causes. Let's go take a look at one of those causes, because I got a new toy, and let me tell you, it softens the blow of not having this. This is a John Deere 316. And to anyone who's familiar with the 316, 318, 322, 330 models, you're going to look at this and go, wait, that's not a regular 316. And that's true. It's not. This is a 1978 model, which is a 1 year only. One of the big differences you'll notice is the hood scoops are a different shape. They don't have the vents in the back like the 84 through 92 models do. We have individual braking. You can flip this up and you can brake left and right independently. That's kind of neat. It's got drum brakes in the back. And the big one, it's got 2 levers there and 2 sets of remotes. The 78 only model had 2 spool hydraulics. The other big difference is that, unlike the Gasser 300 and 400 series, it does not have a twin cylinder engine. It has a single cylinder Kohler K341, still 16 horsepower, but only out of 1 cylinder. There's going to be some debating what is better, the Onans or the Kohlers. I think parts and rebuildability on the Kohlers is much cheaper and easier. So to me, I think this is the better engine. But you might disagree, and that would be okay. And I would love to know why. So put that in the comments. So when I got this thing, it felt like the engine was stuck. You could kind of move it, but it wouldn't move very well. So finally I figured I'm going to have to take the thing out anyways, pull it apart. So I start disassembling it. I pulled off the front panel here, and I pulled off the PTO clutch. And when I did, everything suddenly started moving. And I looked into the PTO clutch and saw a little piece of belt sticking out. That ended up being an entire drive belt that broke and got sucked in there. I pulled probably about a 48, 50-inch belt out from behind it. And next thing I knew, everything turned quickly enough to make spark. I cleaned the carburetor out, and she fired right up. The only issue that I ran into at first was no forward and backwards. I got forward and still didn't have backwards. This is the free spin knob on these things to push them because they're hydrostatic. And there's two valves, a forward valve and a reverse valve. And they can get stuck, especially if they sit with the freewheel knob pushed in for too long. And that's exactly what happened. Eventually it decided that it was going to go forward and backwards, and it does it really well. It actually goes backwards just as quickly as it goes forwards, with only a minor amount of adjustment versus forwards. So going backwards is a bit of a jerky affair until you get used to it. The seat's from the 240. I stole that. The ignition switch, that is from the 240. I did have to do some rewiring. There are two different kinds of ignition switches for these older Deeres. They are not compatible with each other just directly. They do plug into each other, but the wiring will be different. You can wire them up and make them work, but just know that if you ever get into that situation where the ignition, the part that comes through, does not nicely fit through the hole, it's because you have the wrong one. This one I had to drill out the hole a little bit and, like I said, do some rewiring. Totally doable, but just something to keep in mind. One of the things I'm going to do here is get a 3-point hitch. There are a couple companies that make category 0 3-point hitches for these things. It's a neat thing. This would have been the piece that goes to, I think this thing had a rototiller on the back at one point. This piece gets replaced with the linkage that comes through and then works all the 3-point stuff. Lift arms, top link, all that. I won't fire it up because it's loud. It does work. I'll get some videos later on in a maybe a little more conducive format to videoing. I also have the headlight piece, but that fell out. But I'll get some videos of it running later on. But yeah, here she is. I would love to have the 240 still, to have a 200 series and a 300 series. Maybe eventually get one of the 400 series later on. But for now, I mean, this is a more useful machine, especially with the hydraulics and the remotes and whatnot. So yeah, I think it'll work out really well. Thank you guys for watching. Like always, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.